The sun was shining bright over the busy streets of Los Angeles, creating that familiar, golden glow that seems to cover everything in California. It was one of those afternoons where the traffic was moving slowly, and the heat was rising off the pavement. Most people were sitting inside their air-conditioned cars, impatiently tapping their steering wheels, but not Keanu Reeves. He was enjoying the ride. Keanu was riding his favorite motorcycle, a machine that looked powerful and fast but was also built for comfort. He wasn't wearing a flashy helmet or bright racing gear. He had on a simple, dark jacket, a t-shirt underneath, and his usual pair of worn-out boots that had clearly seen a lot of miles. To anyone driving past in a hurry, he looked like just another guy enjoying his day off. He didn't have a police escort or a big SUV following him with security guards. He was just Keanu, blending perfectly into the flow of the city. He had decided to treat himself. After months of back-to-back filming on different movie sets, flying around the world, and spending hours in makeup trailers, he finally had a break. He didn't want to go to a party or walk down a red carpet. He wanted to do something normal. He wanted to buy a car. Not just any car, but a specific high-performance sports car he had been thinking about for a long time. He had saved up for it, not because he couldn't afford it, but because he respected the value of money and the hard work it takes to earn it. Keanu steered his bike toward an area known for luxury car dealerships. These streets were lined with massive glass buildings showing off Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Porsches. The buildings looked like jewelry boxes for the rich and famous. As he pulled up to one particular showroom, the engine of his motorcycle purred softly before he turned it off. He swung his leg over the seat and took off his helmet, shaking his messy hair to let it breathe. He parked his bike near the entrance, right next to a row of sparkling cars that cost more than most people's houses. It was a funny sight to see his dusty, rugged bike sitting next to these pristine, polished machines worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Keanu didn't care about that. He liked his bike, and he was excited to see the new cars. As he walked toward the glass entrance doors, he adjusted his cap. He wasn't trying to hide, but he also wasn't trying to be noticed. It was a natural habit for him. He grabbed the handle of the heavy glass door and pulled it open. A rush of cool, air-conditioned air hit his face, carrying the distinct smell of new leather and expensive carpet. It was quiet inside, almost library-like, except for the low hum of classical music playing in the background. The showroom was huge. The floor was so shiny you could see your reflection in it. In the center of the room, spotlights pointed down on the cars, making them look like masterpieces in a museum. There were only a few people inside. A well-dressed couple was looking at a red convertible near the back, and a few staff members in sharp suits stood near a coffee machine, laughing softly among themselves. Keanu walked in slowly, taking his time. He didn't walk with the arrogant strut of someone who thinks they own the place. He walked with the relaxed, easy pace of someone who is just curious and appreciates good engineering. He stuffed his hands into his pockets and looked around. His eyes scanned the room, moving past the smaller cars until they landed on exactly what he came for. Sitting in the corner, under a bright spotlight, was the car. It was a sleek, low-to-the-ground sports car with a curve to its body that looked like it was moving even when it was standing still. It was painted in a deep, shiny color that seemed to change as the light hit it. It was beautiful. Keanu's face lit up, just a little bit. A small, genuine smile appeared on his lips. It was the look of a kid seeing a toy he had always wanted. He walked toward the car, moving carefully around the other displays. He didn't touch anything yet, he just looked. He admired the shape of the headlights and the way the tires sat on the rims. To Keanu, cars weren't just status symbols to show off to neighbors. He appreciated the mechanics, the power, and the art that went into building something like this. While he was admiring the car, the staff members at the back continued their conversation. They glanced at him, but their eyes just slid right past him. In a place like this, where suits and Rolexes were the uniform, Keanu looked like the delivery guy or someone who had wandered in by mistake to get out of the heat. They saw the old boots, the plain t-shirt, and the simple cap, and they made an instant judgment. They didn't see a movie star with a bank account full of millions. They saw a guy who probably couldn't afford the floor mats, let alone the car. Keanu, however, was completely unaware of their judgment. He was in his own world. He walked around the back of the car, checking out the exhaust pipes and the wide stance of the vehicle. He finally stepped closer to the driver's side door and leaned in. He rested his hand gently on the roof of the car, feeling the cool metal under his palm. He peered inside the window, looking at the interior. The leather seats looked comfortable, and the dashboard was packed with technology, yet it still had classic dials and buttons. It was perfect. He stood there for a long time, just taking it all in. The other customers in the showroom left, and for a moment, it was just Keanu and the cars. The silence of the room felt peaceful to him. He let out a quiet breath, feeling happy that he had come in. He was ready to talk business. He was ready to ask questions about the horsepower, the handling, and the delivery times. He was ready to write a check and drive the car off the lot that same day. But slowly, the mood in the room began to shift. The staff members had finished their coffee and were starting to walk the floor. One of them, a tall man with a perfectly pressed suit and a tie that cost more than Keanu's motorcycle helmet, began to walk in his direction. The man didn't have a welcoming smile on his face. He had a look of annoyance, as if Keanu was a problem he needed to solve. The peaceful afternoon was about to take a turn, but Keanu stood there by the car, still smiling, completely unaware that he was about to be treated like he didn't belong. The quiet peace of the showroom didn't last long. The sound of expensive leather shoes squeaking against the perfectly polished floor broke the silence. It was a sharp, rhythmic sound that got louder as it approached the corner where Keanu was standing. Keanu didn't turn around immediately, he was too focused on the beautiful curve of the car's fender. But he could sense someone standing right behind him, watching his every move. When Keanu finally turned around, he saw a tall man standing there with a tight, forced smile plastered on his face. This man was the complete opposite of Keanu. He was wearing a suit that looked like it cost a fortune, perfectly tailored with not a single wrinkle. His hair was gelled back so tightly that not a single strand was out of place, and he was holding a tablet in one hand and a pen in the other, looking like he meant business. But despite the professional outfit, his eyes were cold. They were scanning Keanu from head to toe, taking in the scuffed boots, the simple t-shirt, and the worn-out jacket. For a brief second, the salesman's smile flickered. It was a look that everyone has seen at some point in their lives, the look of judgment. He decided in that split second that Keanu wasn't a serious buyer. He decided that Keanu was just someone killing time, dreaming about a car he could never afford. "Can I help you?" the salesman asked. His voice wasn't welcoming. It was sharp and loud, echoing slightly in the quiet showroom. He didn't say it with kindness, he said it the way a security guard might tell someone to move along. Keanu, being the polite person he is, didn't get offended. He just nodded his head and offered a friendly smile. He pointed back at the car he had been admiring. "Hi," Keanu said softly. Yeah, I was just looking at this one. I was wondering about the specs on the engine. Does this have the new hybrid system in it, or is it purely combustion? It was a good question. It was a question from someone who knew about cars. But the salesman didn't seem to care about the question. He barely looked at the car. He kept his eyes locked on Keanu's clothes, looking for a logo or a brand name that he recognized. When he didn't find one, he let out a barely audible sigh. "This is a very high-end machine," the salesman said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "It's top of the line. Extremely exclusive. Not for everyone." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "I know, that's why I'm asking about the engine. I like the engineering." The salesman chuckled dryly, a dismissive sound that was meant to make Keanu feel small. "Well, the technical details are complicated. It's a lot of horsepower. A lot of torque. You probably wouldn't find this type of car on a normal rental lot, if you know what I mean." He laughed at his own little joke, assuming Keanu was just browsing for a rental car or had no idea what he was looking at. Keanu didn't laugh. He just stood there, looking patient. He tried again. "I'm actually looking to buy today," he said simply. "If the handling is as good as they say, I might take it." The salesman's smile vanished completely. He didn't believe a word of it. He looked around the empty showroom, checking to see if anyone else was watching. He seemed annoyed that he had to spend his time talking to someone he considered a tire kicker, someone who touches the merchandise but has no money to pay for it. He wanted Keanu to leave so he could go back to the comfort of the office or wait for a customer who looked the part. "Listen," the salesman said, taking a step closer and invading Keanu's personal space. "These cars aren't just sitting here. People are on waiting lists for this model. It requires a serious financial commitment. Proof of insurance, credit checks, large down payments. It's a long process." He said the word process slowly, as if he was speaking to a child. He was trying to intimidate Keanu, trying to make him feel like he didn't belong in that world. Keanu shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He wasn't trying to argue. He wasn't trying to prove who he was. He just wanted to buy a car. "I understand the process," Keanu said calmly. "I have the time. I was just hoping to sit inside it, see how the cockpit feels. I want to check the blind spots." The salesman looked at Keanu like he had just asked to fly the car to the moon. "We don't just let people sit in the show cars," he snapped. "The leather is delicate. We keep them pristine for serious clients." The tension in the air was getting heavy. You could feel the awkwardness of the moment. Keanu was standing there, a man who could likely buy the entire dealership with a single check, being treated like he didn't have two pennies to rub together. But what hurt most wasn't the refusal, it was the disrespect. It was the way the salesman looked down his nose, the way his lip curled up in disgust when he looked at Keanu's old jacket. "Is there anything else?" the salesman asked, tapping his pen aggressively against his tablet. "Because I have some calls to make for actual appointments." Keanu looked at the car one last time, then back at the man. "No," Keanu said, his voice quiet but steady. "I just wanted to see the car. That's all." The salesman let out another huff, shaking his head. He muttered something under his breath, something that sounded like "waste of my time," before turning his back on Keanu and walking a few steps away. He pulled out his phone and started texting loudly, making it very clear that Keanu was being ignored. Keanu didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He just stood there for a moment, looking at the situation with a sense of calm disbelief. He had dealt with paparazzi, with crazy fans, with dangerous stunts on movie sets, but this kind of simple, everyday rudeness was something else. It was a reminder of how judgmental the world could be. He looked around the showroom again. The other staff members were glancing over, whispering to each other and snickering. They were all in on the joke. They all thought the scruffy guy in the corner was dreaming too big. The salesman turned back around, pointing a finger toward the glass doors at the front of the building. "Look, buddy. I'm going to be honest with you. We have VIPs coming in later. We need the floor clear. Why don't you go check out the motorcycle shop down the street? I think they have some gear in your price range." It was a direct insult. It was cruel and unnecessary. The showroom went silent. The air conditioning seemed to blow even colder. Keanu stood there, alone in the center of the luxury, judged not by his heart or his character, but by the fabric of his clothes. He took a deep breath, the kind of breath you take to keep your patience, and looked the salesman in the eye. The moment had arrived where something had to give. The rudeness had reached its peak, and Keanu was about to show everyone that you can't judge a book by its cover. The situation in the quiet showroom went from bad to worse very quickly. The salesman, with his nose high in the air, didn't just walk away to let Keanu look in peace. Instead, he marched over to a glass office at the back of the room. Through the thin walls, Keanu could see him gesturing wildly, pointing a finger in his direction and talking to an older man who sat behind a large mahogany desk. This man was the sales manager. He looked even more polished than the first salesman, with a suit that looked like it was painted on and gold cufflinks that caught the light every time he moved his hands. The manager stood up, looking annoyed that his coffee break had been interrupted. He smoothed his tie, walked out of the office, and straightened his jacket as he marched toward Keanu. He didn't walk with the friendly bounce of someone happy to help a customer. He walked with the heavy, determined steps of a bouncer getting ready to throw someone out of a bar. As the manager approached, the other staff members stopped what they were doing to watch. It felt like the whole room was holding its breath. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The manager stopped right in front of Keanu, invading his personal space, leaving barely a foot between them. He looked Keanu up and down one more time, his face twisting into a sneer of pure disbelief. "Sir," the manager said, his voice hard and loud. It wasn't a question, it was a command. "I've been told you're refusing to leave." Keanu looked at him, his eyes calm and confused. He put his hands up in a peaceful gesture, trying to defuse the situation. "No, not at all," Keanu said softly. "I was just asking about the car. I'm interested in buying it. I just wanted to see the engine." The manager let out a short, sharp laugh that was incredibly rude. He looked over at the first salesman and they shared a smirk, like they were sharing a secret joke. Then the manager turned back to Keanu, his face turning serious again. "Listen to me, and listen closely. This is a luxury establishment. We deal with high net worth individuals here. People who dress the part. People who belong." He paused, letting his words sink in, trying to make Keanu feel small. "You come in here dressed like, well, dressed like that. You touch the merchandise. You bother my staff with questions about specs you probably wouldn't understand anyway. It's insulting. You're insulting us." Keanu stood there, stunned. He was used to a lot of things in his life. He was used to long hours on set, dangerous stunts, and crazy fans. But he wasn't used to being spoken to like this. He felt a flush of heat rise up his neck, not from anger, but from the sheer embarrassment of the moment. He looked around and saw a family standing near the entrance, a father and mother with their young child. They were watching the scene unfold, their mouths open in shock. The father looked angry at how Keanu was being treated. "I really do have the money," Keanu tried to explain one last time. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it was sincere. "I'm not here to waste your time. I just want to buy a car." "Save it," the manager snapped, cutting him off. "I've been in this business for 20 years. I can tell a serious buyer from a dreamer. And you, my friend, are just a dreamer looking for a free ride on a Sunday afternoon." He stepped even closer, lowering his voice to a threatening growl. "Now, I'm not going to ask you again. Get out. Before I call security and have you escorted off the property in handcuffs." The threat of handcuffs was ridiculous. Keanu Reeves, a man known worldwide for his action movies, was being threatened by a car salesman. It was a moment that was so absurd it felt like a scene from a movie, but the sad reality was that it was happening in real life. Keanu looked at the manager's face, searching for even a tiny hint of kindness or humanity, but there was none. There was only greed and arrogance. The manager saw a guy in old clothes and decided he was trash. He didn't see the person. He didn't see the human being standing in front of him. In that moment, Keanu made a choice. He didn't fight back. He didn't yell. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He didn't pull out his phone and call his lawyer. He decided to be the bigger person. He decided that this man's bad attitude wasn't going to ruin his day. Keanu slowly lowered his head and nodded. "Okay," he said simply. "Okay. I'm going." "Good," the manager huffed, stepping back and crossing his arms as if he had just won a great victory. "And don't come back until you can afford a tie that matches your shoes." Keanu ignored the final insult. He turned away from the beautiful sports car that he had wanted so badly just 5 minutes ago. He walked toward the glass doors. The walk felt like the longest walk of his life. With every step, he could feel the eyes of the staff burning into his back. He could hear the snickers and the whispers starting up again behind him. They were celebrating his departure. They were laughing at the bum who thought he could drive a supercar. As he reached for the door handle, he looked back one last time at the family standing nearby. The young child was looking at him with wide, sad eyes, clearly confused as to why the nice man was being yelled at. Keanu gave the little boy a small, sad smile and a gentle wave. It was a tiny gesture, but it showed exactly who Keanu was. Even when he was being humiliated, he still had kindness in his heart for a stranger. He pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped back out into the bright Los Angeles sun. The heat hit him instantly, a sharp contrast to the cold, air-conditioned cruelty of the showroom he had just left. As the door clicked shut behind him, cutting off the sound of the salesman's laughter, Keanu let out a long, deep breath. He stood there on the sidewalk for a moment, the world moving around him. Cars were driving by, people were laughing, and life was going on. But Keanu felt a heavy weight in his chest. It wasn't about the car. He could buy a car anywhere. It was about the way people treated each other. It was the realization that no matter how much good you do in the world, there are still people who will judge you solely on what you look like. He walked over to where he had parked his motorcycle. His bike looked lonely sitting there next to the empty curb. He ran his hand over the handlebars, feeling the comfort of something that was real, something that didn't care about suits or money. He put his helmet back on, covering his face, shielding his identity. If the manager had known who was under that helmet, he would have been begging on his knees. But the manager would never know. At least, not yet. Keanu kicked the starter of his bike. The engine roared to life, a loud, powerful sound that cut through the quiet afternoon. It was a sound of freedom. He looked back at the showroom one last time through the glass. The manager was already back in his office, laughing on the phone, probably bragging about how he had kicked out a loser. The rude salesman was leaning against the car Keanu had wanted, picking his teeth with a toothpick and looking bored. Keanu didn't honk his horn. He didn't yell. He just sat there for a second, a plan forming in his mind. He wasn't leaving town. He wasn't going home to sulk. He was just getting started. He put his visor down, revved the engine one more time, and pulled out into traffic, ready to turn this humiliating afternoon into something truly unforgettable. The game wasn't over, in fact, it was just about to begin. As Keanu rode away from the first dealership, the wind was rushing against his jacket, but his mind was clear. He wasn't angry, and he wasn't planning some big dramatic fight. He just knew that he still wanted that car. He had set his heart on it, and he wasn't going to let one rude man with an expensive suit ruin his day. He had handled himself with dignity, and that was enough for him. He rode his bike for just a few minutes until he saw another large building with the same logo on the front. It was a rival dealership, part of the same brand but owned by different people. This showroom looked just as fancy, with big glass windows and shiny cars parked out front. Keanu slowed down and pulled into the lot, parking his bike right near the entrance. He took off his helmet and shook out his hair, taking a deep breath. He hoped this time would be different. As he walked toward the glass doors, a young salesman spotted him. This salesman was younger, dressed a bit more casually, and he had a big, genuine smile on his face. He didn't look at Keanu's boots or his old jacket. He looked right at Keanu's face. His eyes went wide with recognition as he realized who was walking into his store. "Oh my goodness," the salesman whispered, but he quickly composed himself. He didn't scream or cause a scene. He just walked up to Keanu with his hand extended, looking incredibly happy to see him. "Welcome. It is an absolute honor to have you here. How can we help you today, Mr. Reeves?" The difference was like night and day. Keanu smiled, relieved to be treated like a human being again. "Please, just call me Keanu," he said, shaking the young man's hand. "And I'm looking for a specific sports car. The one with the new hybrid engine. I saw it at the other lot, but, well, things didn't work out there." The salesman's smile faded a little, looking concerned. "I'm sorry to hear that. But you came to the right place. We actually have that exact model in the showroom right now. Would you like to see it?" "I would love to," Keanu said. The salesman led him inside, but unlike the other place, he didn't follow Keanu around like a hawk or watch him suspiciously. He gave Keanu space but was close enough to answer any questions. Keanu walked over to the car. It was beautiful. It was the exact same make and model he had looked at 10 minutes ago, but for some reason, it looked even better here. Keanu opened the door and sat inside. The smell of the leather was perfect. He gripped the steering wheel, feeling the weight of it. "This is it," Keanu said, looking up at the salesman. "This is the one. I don't need to test drive it. I know how it drives. I want to buy it." The salesman was surprised but professional. "That's great. We can get the paperwork started. It usually takes a few hours to run the credit and get the financing set up with the bank. Keanu pulled out his wallet. I don't need financing, he said calmly. I'll pay for it in full. Right now. Is that possible? The room went quiet for a second. The other salespeople nearby stopped what they were doing to listen. Paying full price for a luxury sports car on the spot was something that rarely happened. The salesman's eyes lit up with excitement, not just because of the commission, but because he was helping a legend. Yes, absolutely. The salesman said, his voice shaking a little with enthusiasm. We can do that right now. We can have you out of here in an hour. They moved fast. Keanu signed the papers without reading every single line with a lawyer, trusting the young man. He handed over his card, and the transaction went through instantly. There was no judgment, no rude comments about his clothes, and no skepticism. Just respect and efficiency. As the paperwork was finishing, Keanu had a thought. He looked out the window of the second dealership. He could see down the street. He could see the roof of the first dealership where the rude manager had kicked him out. A small, mischievous idea popped into his head. He wasn't going to scream at them, and he wasn't going to demand an apology. He was going to do something much better. He was going to let the car do the talking. Does the car have a full tank of gas? Keanu asked. Yes, topped up and ready to go, the salesman said, handing him the keys. Perfect, Keanu said, taking the key fob. He stood up and shook the salesman's hand warmly again. Thank you for being so kind. You made my day. Keanu walked out to the car. It was waiting for him right in front of the showroom, gleaming under the sun. He got into the driver's seat and pushed the start button. The engine roared to life, a low, throaty growl that sounded like pure power. He revved it once, just to hear the sound, and smiled. He put the car in drive and pulled out onto the road. The car handled like a dream. It was smooth, fast, and responsive. But he didn't head toward the highway to go home. He turned the wheel and headed back toward the first dealership. The plan was simple. He wasn't going in there. He was just going to pass by. He drove slowly down the street, approaching the rude showroom. As he got closer, he could see through their big glass windows. The rude manager was standing near the entrance, still looking annoyed. He was talking to the salesman who had been so mean to Keanu earlier. They were laughing, probably bragging about how they had kicked the bum out. Keanu slowed the car down to a crawl. He turned his wheel and steered the brand new, shiny sports car right into their lot. He didn't park it, he just idled right in front of the big glass doors, blocking their perfect view of the street. Inside the showroom, the laughter stopped. The rude salesman looked out the window, and his jaw dropped. The manager followed his gaze. There, sitting behind the wheel of the exact car Keanu had wanted to buy, was the man they had just thrown out. The windows were tinted, so they couldn't see him at first. They just saw the car. Then, Keanu rolled down the window. The engine was purring softly, a sound of money and power that they knew all too well. He looked right at the manager. He didn't look angry. He had a calm, peaceful expression on his face. He lifted one hand off the steering wheel and gave a small, slow wave. The manager's face turned pale white. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He recognized Keanu instantly now that he was sitting in the car. He realized that he had just kicked a multi-millionaire movie star out of his store and lost a massive sale because of his own arrogance. The rude salesman dropped his clipboard. It hit the floor with a loud crash, but nobody flinched. They were all staring at Keanu. Keanu didn't say a word. He didn't roll down the window to yell "I told you so." He didn't need to. The look on their faces was punishment enough. He just revved the engine one more time, a sharp, loud roar that echoed through the parking lot, and then, with a small smirk, he slammed his foot on the gas. The tires squealed just a little bit as the car jumped forward, accelerating smoothly away from the curb. He left them in his dust, literally and figuratively. In their rearview mirror, they saw the tail lights fade away, carrying with them the most famous action star in the world, who was now driving their competitor's car. The unreal part wasn't just that he bought the car. It was the silence he left behind. The manager stood there, frozen, mouth open, realizing that he had made the biggest mistake of his career. He hadn't just lost a sale, he had lost his dignity. Keanu Reeves had just taught him a master class in revenge without saying a single word. As the sound of the engine faded into the distance, the silence that fell over the first dealership was heavy. It wasn't the peaceful silence of an empty building, it was the awkward, suffocating silence of a huge mistake. The dust from the tires was still floating in the air when the reality finally hit the rude manager and the arrogant salesman. They just stood there, frozen like statues, staring at the empty street where the car had disappeared. Inside the showroom, the air felt thick and sticky. The manager looked down at his expensive shoes, then over at the salesman. Neither of them spoke. They didn't know what to say. Just a few minutes ago, they felt powerful. They felt like they owned the world and could kick anyone out who didn't fit their idea of a rich person. But now, they felt small. They felt foolish. The salesperson finally broke the silence, though his voice was shaky and weak. That was Keanu Reeves, wasn't it?" he asked, almost begging for the manager to say no. The manager didn't answer. He didn't have to. The look on his face said it all. He walked over to the glass doors and looked out, his hand pressing against the cool glass. He was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. His mind was racing, calculating exactly what he had just lost. It wasn't just the commission from one car sale, although that would have been a massive paycheck. It was the reputation. He realized that he had just treated one of the most famous, most beloved actors in the world like trash. He thought about the way Keanu had stood there, calm and polite, asking simple questions. He thought about how he had laughed in his face. He remembered the insult about the tie and the shoes. Every cruel word he had spoken now echoed in his own ears, mocking him. He had judged a book entirely by its cover, and he had been proven wrong in the most public way possible. The mood in the showroom changed completely. The other staff members, who had been snickering just moments before, were now quiet. They looked at each other with nervous glances. They all knew they had messed up. They all knew that by tomorrow, this story would be all over the internet. People would say, "Don't go to that dealership, they treat people badly." The manager's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he jumped. He ignored it. He couldn't deal with reality right now. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Keanu was enjoying a completely different atmosphere. He was driving on the highway, the windows down, the music playing softly. The new car handled the road perfectly, hugging the curves and responding to his every touch. He felt a sense of peace. He wasn't thinking about the manager or the rude salesman anymore. He had let that go the moment he drove away. He wasn't the kind of person to hold onto a grudge. He believed that life was too short to be angry at people who made mistakes. He knew that the manager would have to live with his own bad attitude, and that was punishment enough. Keanu was just happy to be behind the wheel of a car he loved. He stopped at a red light and looked at his reflection in the mirror. He smiled. He was still just Keanu, a guy in comfortable clothes, driving a nice car. Nothing had changed about who he was on the inside, and that's what mattered. As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Keanu decided to head home. He wasn't going to post about it on social media. He wasn't going to call a news station. He didn't need the world to know that he had won a silent victory. The satisfaction he felt was private. Back at the dealership, the manager was still standing by the window. The sun was going down there, too, but it didn't look beautiful to him. It just marked the end of a terrible day. He looked at the empty spot on the floor where the car Keanu wanted to buy was sitting. It was still there. It was polished, perfect, and unsold. He walked over to the car and placed his hand on the hood, just like Keanu had done earlier. But when he touched it, he didn't feel the excitement of a machine. He only felt the cold reality of his own arrogance. He realized that he had confused the price of a suit with the value of a person. He had thought that money and expensive clothes were what made someone important, but Keanu had shown him that true class comes from how you treat others, even when they are rude to you. The young salesman walked up to him, looking defeated. "Do you think he will ever come back?" he asked quietly. The manager shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He won't be back. And he shouldn't be. We didn't deserve his business. It was a hard lesson, learned the hard way." The manager spent the rest of the evening pacing the floor, worrying about the fallout. He knew that in the morning, he would have to answer to the owner of the dealership. He knew he might even lose his job. And deep down, he knew he deserved it. He had let his ego get in the way of his humanity. The story spread quickly, just as he feared. People whispered about it on social media. "Did you hear about the guy who kicked Keanu Reeves out of a car shop?" It became a legend, a cautionary tale told in break rooms and dinner tables all over the city. But for Keanu, it was just a Tuesday. He pulled into his garage and turned off the engine. The silence of his own home was welcoming. He got out of the car, gave the hood a grateful pat, and walked inside. He had a nice evening planned, maybe some dinner, a movie, or just reading a good book. He had gotten what he wanted, not just the car, but a reminder that being a good person is always the best revenge. In the end, the manager was left staring at the tail lights of a missed opportunity, learning a lesson in humility that he would never forget. And Keanu, he just kept being Keanu, cool, calm, and cruising down the road of life, proving that the best way to handle haters is to simply be happy and successful without them. The showroom door closed, the lights clicked off, and the only thing remaining was the memory of a quiet man who taught a loud room a lesson they would never forget.